You know what that makes me want to do? Makes me want to talk in a really low voice. Makes me want to say, "Hey, Chad, how you doing? How you doing over there, my friend?"
How you doing? You want to intro us?
Yeah, I want to intro us, but I just wanted to talk in that low, deep, sexy voice because that music just inspires me that way. You know what I mean?
I hear you, bro. I
Just
hear
that
you.
kind of sound. Welcome to Dennis in the Know. Chatty, great to see you. Everyone out there, great to almost see you. Hopefully you'll chime in and text us, let us know you're alive and talk to us. But we are the Dennis in the Know. We're without Dr. Jennifer Bell tonight, who is on a lovely family vacation. And so we wish her the best. Can't wait to see her again. Chad finally decided he was going to grace us with his presence tonight. I think he's been off for like 7 weeks or something like that. But anyway, we are the Dennis in the Know. We are your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. We are live. We are over a lovely white blend from Davis Vineyards, one of my faves out there in the Healdsburg area of Sonoma County. And we're here to bring you all in the know. All three of us, Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, are educators. We are all practice owners, and we are all dentists. Go figure. Tonight, we're going to have a cool little talk about bringing on an associate, because both Dr. Chad and myself have brought on new associates just last week, I believe, for both of us. So kind of cool. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the onboarding process. Chad, I think, is going to do some news. So we got a great show for you. So Chatty, welcome back. Not sure where you were for 7 weeks, but man, it's good to see you.
It's great to be seen, man. Good to see you. How's life treating you?
Well, it is. This is not gonna tally up as one of my favorite summers. But a lot of stuff putting a lot of stuff in the rearview mirror, I should say. So I'm looking forward to that. And anyway, we're almost there. But good news is, new associate, Dr. Chris Howard, joined me at the dental practice last week, and really excited because he comes with a lot of great surgical skills that he's bringing from his residency. And I know you brought one on too.
Absolutely. We have Dr. Lauren Daly in our practice now, so it's an honor to have her as well. So I guess we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I have to say, I haven't seen you guys in a few weeks. So
do you remember what I looked like? Did you remember?
Did I remember what?
What I looked like?
Yeah, I did
Okay.
somewhat. But last week was obviously July 4th, so that was out. The week before that, we were on family vacation, but the week before that, I was headed to sunny Florida for the Florida Dental Congress. And I will tell you, there are a lot of state events that are dying on the vine. Florida is not one of them.
Yeah.
So uh, kudos to Florida for a fantastic show. Um, got to
You
hang
know who
with a
else
lot
does
of
a good
people.
job state-wise? Texas always does a damn fine job with their.
You know,
You're not gonna agree.
I went this year. I was very
Okay.
disappointed. I think it's died down quite a bit. I
Huh.
wouldn't disagree with you in the years past. Um, but I think we also have to look at. I don't think it's just Texas. I think it's the states as a whole are having a struggle
Oh,
keeping their
everyone is.
state dental meetings together. San Antonio is a great place, but our profession is changing. Everybody's looking towards more types of continuums and whatnot versus state dental meetings. I mean, um, whereas with Florida, I think that Orlando is always a hot attraction. You've got some great amusement parks there. Um, I wish that things were different because the state conventions and the ADA, I mean, they're not going to be doing it anymore after this year. I think it's don't quote me. I mean, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I believe this year is the last SmileCon
Hmm.
for the foreseeable future. So they're noticing a drop in attendance, but it used to be such a great time for camaraderie and not necessarily just education but just togetherness. And Florida was really hopping. It was impressive.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. But Florida has traditionally done a really good job with their state meetings and really well attended. And Illinois is another one that tends to do pretty well with education. But everyone is seeing that change in education now, and no one has really been able to put their finger on the pulse of it, because there's the millennial generation, there's the Gen Zers now that are coming out and entering the workforce, and it's actually really different for what both of those groups want as well. And really, right now there are kind of three competing groups looking for education, and none of them really want it the same way. But the one thing I will say is that the Gen Zers really uh, they seem to value that one-on-one a little bit more than the millennial generation does. I mean, I hate to generalize, and it's never a good thing, but that's just what I'm seeing with my eyes, and certainly how it feels. But it seems like you said, and this really fits with what you just said about a lot of dentists looking for continuum learning, is I'm just happy to see a group that's looking for something that is rewarding to them in some way, and not just trying to check the box of CE. So, I think it's a good sign. I just think we still have a little bit to learn about how the Gen Zers want it.
We do. And, I think if we look back when these state conventions were at their prime, it was definitely before the dawn of the internet.
Hmm.
And you and I are old enough to remember those days. And I mean, even when we were in dental school, the internet was a quote unquote thing, but it wasn't the thing. Now you can do hands on right on your own laptop and in front of in your own operatory, with the same supplies that the instructor is using. There's really not too terribly many enticing reasons to leave home. And the sad part is that I look at today's generation, including my kids, And I've always said this. I mean, we've become such an impersonal society. We'd prefer to text rather than talk. We'd prefer to FaceTime rather than actually visit. There's a lot of changes that are happening in today's generation that we just weren't really used to. I mean, I don't know how we operated without cell phones and the internet, but we did, and we did just fine. And things are changing.
So I saw a report. It's all interesting points, but I did see a report that like Gen Zers are actually parenting very different than the millennials. So the millennials were really embracing with their kids and with cell phone technology. Our generation, of course, we didn't know, it just happened to us, right? Like, the cell phone era happened to us as parents, and so there was no precedent. We didn't know what was going to come of it. We didn't know that there was chat roulette and all these crazy things out there that they're going to be a problem for our kids. And the millennials kind of embraced all that a lot, and they they tended also to really have a lot of cell phone use, more impersonal, not have so many rules for their young children. And there's a trend now with Gen Zers that are starting to parent, which is that they are actually coming back and instituting new rules about screen time. There seems to be a trend towards wanting to regulate some of that impersonal activity. So I think there's something good on the horizon. I still think we're going to see a resurgence of live meetings, but in different format than what they used to be. Like you said, not in the form of a state meeting where you have 8,000 lecturers, but more in the form of focused learning and continuum learning. But it's just interesting. It's just interesting watching it change and how much it has changed.
I would agree. I would agree. It's just it's sad, but it's kind of we just need to figure out a way to navigate the new norm.
Yeah, that's
So
all. Well, we've been doing that since COVID. So what's one more year, Chad?
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Isn't that hard to
3 years
believe?
to build a
But hey,
building. What's one more year?
I don't think we're going to celebrate tonight, but I think it deserves to be brought up. Is that tonight represents 5 years since our first show.
Hi, Mazel Tov.
Mazel tov. That's right, man. Isn't that awesome? 5 years we've been doing this.
Well, cheers to you, buddy. And
Cheers to
cheers
you.
to JB wherever you are right now. And this is sad. I mean, I usually know exactly where you guys are at. We always know what we're all doing. And this is the first time I don't even know where she's on vacation, to be honest.
I believe she's in Spain.
Spain.
España. And the only reason that I know that is because her son posted a story on Instagram yesterday, and it said something about Barcelona. So, I think they took their kids to Spain.
Barcelona.
Barcelona. So, hey, you want to do a little news before we get
Go
going?
ahead. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
All right.
I'm. You actually really impressed me with the news the last time you did it. So let's see if you've upped your game even more.
Well, there's a couple things that we're going to talk about, but the first thing that I want to bring up is that this is a study that came out, or a survey that came out in June of this year, and I don't really know where it ranks based on, but I found it rather interesting, and so I think it has definite implications for our profession, but it is according to the CareQuest Institute for Oral Health. They did a 2024 State of Oral Health Equity in America survey, and they found out that an alarming 27% of U.S. adults, which is roughly 72 million adults, do not have dental insurance. The figure stands in stark contrast to 9.5% of adults of that same, demographic. Only 9.5% don't have medical insurance. So this really highlights, they stated, a persistent and growing gap in healthcare coverage. Now, if we think about that for a second, 27% of adults don't have dental insurance. 72 million adults don't have dental insurance. Some of us may see that as a problem. However, others of us might see that as an opportunity, because if we have patients without dental insurance, then we don't necessarily need, at least if roughly a quarter of the adult population doesn't have dental insurance, why are we so damn concerned about assigning ourselves to policies or accepting insurance policies? And so what I see coming from this is I see a lot more practices moving towards the fee-for-service model in their own private practice. I've been fortunate enough that we've been doing it for the past 25 years that I've been with this practice, but I see that's a huge opportunity for practices from that news. And then the other thing that I see from that news is I see the opportunity for every single one of our practices to offer some sort of in-office membership plan that you can create yourself, or you could utilize a company such as Clear, and there's others out there. Clear just happens to be the first one that comes to mind. But you could utilize one of those companies or do it yourself and create an in-office membership plan so that you can allow those patients who don't have dental insurance to continue to see you for dental care, offer them an annual subscription fee as well as a discount on services that are provided outside of that annual subscription fee. It's done wonders in our practice, and I think that it could do wonders in any practice. So that's news item number one. News item number two, I think this is fascinating too, and I want everybody to really listen to this because we've been talking about it for years. The headline of this article is "Over-the-Counter Pills Better Than Opioids After Dental Surgery." Now, we've been hearing this for years. I can't tell you the last time I've written a prescription for a narcotic. And I want to say I've probably done it 2 or 3 times over the past 10 to 12 years. But I think in 2014, maybe 2017, I can't remember the year, they changed the requirements and the laws for the state of Texas as far as prescribing opioids, and the weekend calls of the people whose prescriptions flew out the window, or the ones that were calling from the nightly motel, or so on and so forth. All of those calls all of a sudden stopped. Now, this study was published in January of 2025, January 5th to be exact, from the JADA. And they recruited 1,800 patients that underwent surgery to remove impacted wisdom teeth. Over the week following surgery, patients took medication every 4 to 6 hours as needed for up to 20 doses. Half of these patients received 5 milligrams of hydrocodone and 300 of acetaminophen. The other half took acetaminophen 5 milligrams and ibuprofen 400 milligrams. The people given the combination of acetaminophen and ibuprofen experienced less pain. I think we just went blank for a second. I don't know what happened. StreamYard sucks. But I will say that we have truly proven that acetaminophen and ibuprofen, the combination of those two, which just also so happens to be the formulation of the very popular Advil dual action, is more powerful than the narcotic pain relievers, and patients are experiencing less side effects, better sleep, less pain. That's what we want. So I think the proof's in the pudding.
That's the key.
Absolutely. Or the addiction potential.
Yeah.
And finally, this is more of a public service announcement than anything. This is regarding to the or the assumption or the announcement possibly that we're going to be removing fluoride from the free ebook, and it highlights 80 years of research and practical experience that support community water fluoridation. It's in a question and answer format. It details effectiveness, safety, fluoridation practice, public policy, and costs to help dentists, policymakers, and the general public make informed decisions about fluoridation. Whether you're an ADA member or not, I highly suggest that you download your copy of Fluoridation Facts, the ebook, because I think that we all need to be well informed. We all need to understand what's going on and what's the possibility of being removed, but really, what are the inherent risks or dangers associated with fluoride? So, once again, ADA published that article on opioids. ADA also published the ebook on fluoridation. Once again, I want to thank the ADA. I want to thank Dr. Brett Kessler for his outstanding job at the helm of the leadership for ADA. And that, folks, is the news for tonight.
Nicely done, Chad. I'm gonna give you a little golf clap.
Thank you.
Yeah, nicely done.
Yeah, take that, JB.
Yeah, take that, JB. Anyway, we can handle it when you're not here. God, I wish he'd come back. 25% of the patient population without insurance. And then if you think about what is the percentage of patients with insurance that still want to do the right thing and want the comprehensive treatment plan and are not driven by the insurance that they have, that's got to be another 10, 15%. So, you've got at least 35, 40% of the active dental population that's really looking for quality care. And so, the fact that we're all catering, or that a lot of people are saying we've got to cater to only those people who are insurance minded and what their insurance is going to cover, well, you're only one step away from losing a lot of patients. You're only, one fee schedule change. You're only one procedural change away from, having to make that decision that could drive a lot of those patients that are financially bound, to the cheapest option. It's just not a great place to be in the world. Fighting your way to the bottom is not where you want to be. And unfortunately, so many plans are just not increasing their fee allowance. Or they've got all these people in, and then they start tweaking it a little bit and changing some of the allowances, and changing some of the rules about when this code can be used with this code and when it can't be used. And suddenly dentists find themselves in a spot where they're working harder and making less money, and they're having to see more patients with less income. And I forgot who I was talking to about this, and I'm rambling a little bit because this is actually a sore spot for me. Is when I watch new dentists say, "Well, I want to be busier. I want to be busier. I want to be busier." And I want to see a patient in each room every hour. And I'm like, well, would you rather do 3 big cases at a normal fee schedule allowance, or would you rather be running from room to room for 8 straight hours, get home where your neck starts hurting within 10 years of your starting practice? I mean, being busier is not always being more productive. It's not working smartly. And so I think there's just so much opportunity out there with so many people now working for corporate entities that are, all within plans, and working for large groups. We've talked about this for years, the fact that more general dentists work for large groups and corporate entities now than are in private practice, by a pretty good margin. And so there's this huge opportunity for everyone on the other side of that to say, hey, let's not cater to every insurance. Let's be fee for service. Let's do quality care. And maybe you don't have to see 20 patients in a day to be profitable. Maybe you can see 3 or 4 and have an amazing day that you go home and say, man, I want to do that every day. Uh-oh, not hearing from Chad. Did we freeze? And I think I'm on by myself. Okay. So while we're getting Chad back, he could be talking. He may not be talking. Now there's 2 Chads in the waiting room. All right, that just freaks me out.
Am I here now?
Yeah, you are here now. You froze and went out.
I'm going to say it again. Insurance sucks. You know what else sucks? StreamYard sucks. I'm hardwired. Everything else on my computer is working. The only thing that's not working is StreamYard. And, StreamYard, I'm going to ask you very politely to fix it, because your little thing says that I'm connected to Wi-Fi. However, my computer is hardwired, and my internet that I'm looking at is coming in through hardwired. So there you go, StreamYard. You kind of suck almost as bad as insurance.
Well,
but hey, I've got a story that I want to share, because this is a story that I think patients need to hear. I know this is for dentists, but a lot of us have probably dealt with this. We have a lot of patients that end up leaving our practice to go to an in-network dentist, right? So you leave to go to an in-network dentist, and the old joke is 3 words: they'll be back.
They'll be back.
And it just so happened, and sometimes it's within a couple months, sometimes it's within a couple years, sometimes it's several years down the road. So anyways, I had this delightful family that came to me years ago, and last week they called, and they wanted to come see me. The wife wanted a second opinion, so she comes in yesterday with this treatment plan from a practice, and unfortunately, she had already pursued most of the treatment plan. She, within 3 months, had scaling and root planing with, mind you, not one pocket over 3 millimeters, unless you created a over 3 millimeter pocket. That had been the history in our practice over the past several years. And then that had been the history based upon the findings that we had yesterday. In addition to that, she was told that she needed several fillings. And I'm not going to lie, the dentistry that was done was actually very good. So I give them kudos for that. But the real kicker is that, I don't know about you all, but when we do scaling and root planing, we usually have them back a month later to fine polish and just make sure that everything's kind of tidied up. And that appointment in our practice is another full hour appointment after the scaling and root planing. She went in, they examined her with Mirror and Explorer, told her that everything looked good. She got charged for a cleaning. I can't remember what the coding was, but I saw the fee. And what amazed me is all the fees that were outside of the scope of what was covered under the plan that she was charged every single time that she went in. Oral cancer screening fee, digital impression fee. There were so many fees that were on there. And if you add all of that up, it's way more than what it would have ever cost in our practice. Yes, some of the fees were lower for some of the line items that were covered by insurance because those were contracted, but there were so many fees that weren't on the plan that were just feed out every single time. And, smart patients get it. Smart patients really get it, and
They
it was really disheartening. And quite frankly, I wish I could have published the treatment plan without any names on it because it's a disservice to our profession. Quite frankly, it's the reason that when you go into a local neighborhood social media app, they're asking for an honest dentist in the area that's not going to nickel and dime you, which is something that I saw just earlier today. Um, it's sad. It's
do.
really sad.
Oh,
So,
I agree, but there are some patients, and it's the same patients that will leave you as soon as somebody else accepts their plan and does so in another you know does so in a way that maybe doesn't necessarily mean that they're being 100% compliant, but there's so many people that make their decisions, just strictly financially based. And I get it. If you have a big family and, if you're getting dinged for 25 or 30 bucks on every single cleaning, yeah, it can add up. But look at what all is being charged, and then ask yourself if there's an office that's willing to just keep throwing all these extra charges on, knowing what you spent there. Are they doing it? Are they not doing it? Is this the person that I really want responsible for my dental health care? And that's why so many come back, because you're right. They're smart. They see it, Chad.
yeah, they do. It's sad. So, and I think this is kind of, Jeff, this conversation is kind of a perfect segue because you mentioned
Yeah.
something earlier into talking about, bringing on an associate because there was something that you mentioned earlier about being busy. We've got a new associate and we're trying to teach the quote unquote ropes of the insurance game to the associate, and when I say game, what I mean by that is how do we appropriately relate to patients? How do we determine what we do, what we hold off on, and everything? But let's talk about this associate thing for the time that we have left, and how it works. You've had several associates. You have one that you have two that bought practices of yours,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Well,
And then
actually not. The my first in Conway, my main practice, my associate bought that practice. In this practice in Murrells Inlet, it was actually another dentist that I am now partnered with that purchased this practice. But my associate from this practice originally was going to be the one that bought that practice. He ended up moving down to the Hilton Head area. So,
okay,
purchasing a practice down there. Yeah. But, it's bringing an associate on is, I mean, you're hopefully setting this up for a future partnership. To me, that's how I've always looked at an associate. Is this is not just somebody to come in and flip the burgers. This is somebody that in an ideal world I could also develop a retirement strategy or an exit strategy and know that my patients are being taken care of. And I don't know about you, but every associate that I've hired has been with that kind of a mindset, not just trying to find somebody to fill the space or to bill out fees, but to find somebody that will continue the kind of patient care that I tried to provide, and somebody that will do so, with a lot of integrity, and that, as that partnership builds and as that friendship and camaraderie build, that perhaps this is part of the exit strategy for myself. So I'm sure you think the same way when you're looking for an associate.
Well, we had this conversation this morning, and
Mhm.
I was trying to figure out the appropriate way to verbalize it outside of the fact that stream. But I was trying to figure out the appropriate way to verbalize it, and I said, Jeff, there's a couple of ways that you look for an associate or an associate looks for you. And the first is it a profitable decision? You know, I mean, of course, we all want to be profitable in what we want to do. Is it a business decision? You need somebody in there to just churn profit for your practice. And that's not necessarily wrong. But,
Right.
I really think that the second decision that you need to look for is it a practice decision? Is it what's best for the practice? Is this person that I'm looking for, do I want them to come in and make money for me, for us, for whoever? Or do I want them to come in and provide the same quality of care and create the same loyalty and trust that we've been doing for the past however many years? And really become an integral part of the practice and potentially take over the practice. And I think that there's not necessarily anything wrong with either mentality, but that's one of the first questions that you have to answer. What's your reason in looking for an associate? Is and I think there's a big distinction there. Is it a profit or is it a potential? And because the potential can be extremely profitable as well.
Well, and the other side of that too is, associates that are looking at, yeah, they're well educated now in, what the corporate world looks like versus what the private world. And I think a lot of them are seeing that opportunity in the fee for service world. Um, I feel like their priorities, at least the people that I had the opportunity to interview this last go around, just seemed to be a way better pool than what I had been introduced to, say in over the last 10 years. And I was really impressed. The questions that they were asking, and the wanting to build a future, and so as a fee for service provider, you have an inherent advantage with most associates that really value the things that make you want to be a fee for service provider and not corporate, right? So you have that inherent advantage already. The disadvantage is maybe you can't sign that big bonus check like someone else can, but I think that they really see that. Like, so many of them see through that. Yeah, I can get a big bonus check today, but then the HR department can nail my ass 2 years down the road and say, hit the road, buddy, or I'm cutting your patient load, or you're never going to be more than just a burger flipper here. So there's I think the pool is getting smarter. I think the business savvy of some of the people coming out is richer now. And we still talk about clinical skills maybe not being where they were, but again, I'm only looking for somebody. If I'm looking for that care that I feel comfortable turning over, I'm only looking for somebody with residency experience at least anyway. I'm not taking someone that is fresh out of school, and or at least I'm not turning over the reins to them, to start going at it until there's been some kind of an apprenticeship or residency done.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I kind of looked at both ways as well, and I think that our associateship. I mean, we'll talk about this, but our what we were looking for. I've got a partner that's nearing retirement age, not necessarily quite there yet, but knows that his days are close. He wants to dial it back, but he still wants a hand in the practice, and so we wanted somebody wanted to kind of grow with the practice, kind of see how we do it. So, you know, that's really what we were looking for. Is we've got a wonderful young doctor right out of school. Really excited about her, and we're totally forthright. You know, we're going to have you in the practice. You know, you're going to be here clinically, but you're also going to be here hopefully to learn, because private practice is way different than dental school. In the first few days, I'm extremely impressed with her skill set and knowledge. Um, but that was it for us. It was the perfect fit because she was looking to grow with a practice. She was looking to learn from a practice. She understood that she didn't learn everything that she needed to in dental school. And so, I've spent these past few days with her, just really kind of coaching her. And my favorite phrase is, if I ever sound like your instructor, stop me, because I don't want to be your instructor. I want to be your mentor. And that would be the greatest honor if I could be a mentor to you. So, if you feel that I'm telling you how to do things, that's not what I'm doing. I'm telling you what I would do in that situation. And, there's some fear and trepidation that, quite frankly, I didn't have when I came out of dental school. But I think the days and the time have changed quite greatly since we came out of dental school. I mean, just in speaking with her and other students, they don't get near the experience that we received in dental school. And I think COVID had a huge part to do with that.
Yeah, no doubt. But what you're talking about, Chad, is that's true apprenticeship. And if you have a doc in the practice that's slowing down and can really offer that mentorship, that's apprenticeship. And you're not saying come in and I'm going to turn you over. So it depends on what you're looking for. I'm in a different situation because when I am not in that practice, I'm gone. I'm not there to be mentoring and doing all that great stuff. So the last thing that I want to do is just turn that over to somebody that doesn't at least have a residency experience. But if I were in your situation and had a doc that's wanting to slow down and had the opportunity to really mentor someone, then 100% attitude and ideals and goals and alignment of values are what is the most important thing. And speed comes, and if that's not what you need at that point, I think that's a great way to bring an associate. And it's just, in my case, I didn't have the opportunity to have someone there 4 or 5 days a week for mentorship. I'm only there a day and a half in that dental practice. And so that's not comfortable for me to say, okay, I'll mentor you a day and a half, but the rest of the days just, good luck.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I'll tell you a little thing that happened on her first day, and if she's by chance listening, I want to tell her that this is a compliment rather than anything else. But she had a patient that came in and went in and treatment planned the patient and everything. And I said, okay, what are you going to do? Well, I think that we need to do several fillings. We need to do a few crowns. We need to do a few implants. I said, okay, well, what about this tooth right here? What's that going to be? Well, that's going to be an implant. I said, okay. I said, is this patient leaving with a referral? Because we don't place implants within our practice. Is this patient leaving with a referral for the extraction and the implant placement? Oh no, I can get that tooth out. I said, well, you know what? I said, I can too. And I said, the question becomes,
you can doesn't mean you should.
Could you or should you? And there was a pause for a second, and I said, look, we can both go extract this tooth right now. I said, it's going to be a slam dunk. I said, however, are you going to do the sinus lift? Well, do we know that the patient needs a sinus lift? Well, based upon the PA alone, they probably are. I said, but we don't have a CBCT, which we need to get. And I said, but, probably a sinus lift, definitely some bone grafting. There's going to be a huge void left behind by that. And I said, and there's also the possibility that this tooth could be extracted, the implant could be placed, the bone grafting could be done all in the same day. We cover it up and we let it heal, and it saves them 3 months of healing time. So do you still think you can get that tooth out? Oh, I know I can get that tooth out, but I shouldn't take that tooth out. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And that's worth more than a year of dental school.
Yeah.
Honestly, just moments like that, good teaching moments. Um, again, and it's why I've always loved continuum learning. I've always loved, having a mentor, somebody that just asks you those kinds of questions, and just, you know, makes you realize that, hey, these last guys cared, about more than just how much money they were bringing home at the end of the day. And maybe I ought to think in a manner similar to that. It's, you know, it, it's so much more about attitude and your willingness to want to provide the highest level of care. That is probably the first, and most important piece to being a good dentist in my eyes.
So let's talk about this for just a second. So, switching gears, we're still talking associates, but let's talk about what, how did you go about? Okay, so you found somebody. Let's start there. Where can you find these people? How did you find your
Yeah,
associate?
Craigslist.
Really?
Yeah, it was
You're
Craigslist.
kidding.
It was MD male dentist looking for M or F dentist.
I'm like, shut up. How did you find your associate?
Actually, the one that is with us now actually came to us through a practice broker who
Okay.
yeah, and it was actually the practice broker that handled my practice, and she knew we were looking, and he was in a residency at the medical, well, it's not the Medical College of Georgia now, it's Augusta University, I think, and whatever the name du jour in Georgia is now. But so came from her. But I had also I had worked with our friend Paul Goodman
Yeah.
at Nachos, and I had used Dentist Job Connect um, to interview several other dentists, and I had some really great interviews. There are a lot of solid dentists that have utilized that site, and it's a really good resource to find people. But I had three great interviews from Dentist Job Connect, and one of them was almost hired, and this fella came along, and it just everything just kind of fell into place. It was interesting. So I want to ask you the same exact question. I want to find out how you met your associate, but then I want to follow that up with another question. And just so I don't forget, I'm going to put it out there in the ether. Is what was at the top of your associate's mind, as far as, how when you interview someone you can always tell kind of what the motivating factor is for them. What is the thing that you can tell is going to be a deal breaker if you're not able to provide that? And what was really interesting was that for this associate, he said to me, can you tell me that you won't make me practice in another location? Can you tell me that he has two family, and he said, I just want to be stable and be here in Murrells Inlet. And I just want to know you're not going to take me and make me go work somewhere else. That was kind of like one of his biggest points and one of his biggest priorities. And I found that really interesting, which and that was great for me because I'm like, here's someone who wants to be a part of this community. I mean, that's one of the best things you can find in a dentist. So I want to hear how you found your associate, and then I want to hear kind of what you feel like your associate's most important priorities were.
So interesting. I mean, I think sometimes you find something that's just kind of like a diamond in the rough, or just kind of serendipitous the way that it all works out. But um, there was a young lady I met at David Rice's event. I went to an event that David Rice held in Dallas last year, and it was an Ignite DDS event. David does so much for the profession and for the
Mm-hmm.
careers and the
He is amazing for young dentists as far
yeah,
as helping them decide what they want to do.
exactly, for their confidence of the young dentist. He just really does a great job of boosting
Yeah.
confidence of the young dentist. So, anyways, David had an event last year in Dallas, and I went, and I ended up meeting this young lady who was best friends with a neighbor of mine back home. She was from our hometown. She was good friends with a young lady down the street, and we just kind of hit it off. And I said, why don't you come shadow me one day? I said, you're welcome to come anytime. Well, I mean, within 2 weeks, she calls me and says, hey, I'm off this week. Can I come shadow you? And I'm like, absolutely. So she comes in. Well, my ulterior motive was I like this young lady's personality. I think this may be a great fit for our practice. So she comes in, she shadows me, and lo and behold, not only does she shadow us, her whole family becomes patients of our practice, which is an honor in itself. But I said to her that day, I said, "What are your intentions after you graduate from dental school?" She says, "Oh, I'm dating this guy. He's becoming an orthopedic surgeon. He's in residency in Kansas City, and I I got to go up there with him." Well, what are you going to do up there? Well, I'm just going to work in this practice. I'm going to work for a DSO. I've got a job. I'm like, oh, that's great. I said, well, here's the deal. I said, do you know anybody in your class that's just like you that's looking for a job? She says, well, maybe. Let me think about it. So, anyway, she gives me the name of Dr. Daly, who's now working with us in our practice. Call Dr. Daly. She came out. She already had a job offer. I mean, she was going to go work for this practice. And having kids very close to the same age as her, I didn't even know how old she was at the time, but it was just kind of an assumption on my behalf based upon, her stage in life. Um, I was like, ooh, as a father, this practice that you're thinking about going to work in is really not that great. And there were a bunch of red flags. I'm sure it's a great practice, but basically it was a practice that had sold to another doctor. The previous doctor that had sold the practice was working in the practice. The new doctor that had bought the practice was putting all these restrictions like a DSO on the practice and all of these production goals and everything. And the young doctor had never interviewed with the owner of the practice, just interviewed with the doctor who was no longer the owner of the practice. There were just so many red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, look, I said, I'm going to give you some advice. I said, I don't care if you work here. I don't care if you work wherever. I said, but one thing that I would tell you is that this deal just sounds kind of shady. And I said, and as a father, I would suggest that you really look into what you're getting into before you do that. And
Yeah.
she was like, no, I really appreciate that. I said, no, I said, I'm not telling you not to go work there because all I know is what you're telling me. I said, but what you're telling me just doesn't sound right. And it sounds like there's just a lot of questions that remain to be answered. And so anyhow, at the end of that day, she said, are you looking for somebody here? And I said, well, yeah, we are. And she goes, I would like to officially throw my name in the hat as an interested party in this position.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And so we had a couple more visits. We never had a working interview. I I knew based upon who I was dealing with and her accolades and her presence, her attitude, her personality, that this was a really good fit for our practice. And that's just kind of how it worked out. And I think you asked earlier what the red flags were in her coming to work for our practice. And honestly, there
Like
were none.
what was important to what could you tell was really important to her?
I knew what was important to her was a I'm trying to figure out how to say this because it could be a benefit and it could also be a detriment. But what was important to her was the way that she felt when she was in our practice. She realized that we were very personable with our patients. We knew all of our patients. We go into the room and we'll talk about cats, dogs, grandkids, great grandkids, whatever. She really liked that about our practice. The reason that I say that it's kind of a detriment to a certain extent is, as my partner always says, sometimes you just got to read the room.
Yeah.
You may have a patient that comes in and needs a lot of work, but you've got to understand where that patient comes from, what drives that patient, and you may take that patient one tooth at a time you know whereas the other patient, it's not doesn't mean that you're not working towards a common goal, but I think that you're dealing with a deck of cards every single time, and you've got to play your hand appropriately. And I think that knowing your patients, knowing their needs, knowing their desires, knowing their history, uh, you've got to cater that treatment plan to that particular patient. And sometimes you've just kind of limp them along until you can get them into a better state of affairs.
Yeah. Well, it's not. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a great piece of advice that there is no constant formula that works.
No.
Anybody who tells you that, and that was some of the problem with, there were so many practice management firms, and not that they weren't great. I mean, we used over the years, 30 was it 32 years over that time. I mean, we had several practice management firms come through and help us, and I will say every single one of them elevated our practice in one form or another. But what I did learn is through all of those processes is that there is no magic formula that works for everybody. I think that piece of advice that you just gave, Chad, which is read the room, learn
Yeah.
people, learn how to listen to people and understand people. I think that may be the single best piece of advice we can give an associate.
I totally agree. And I want to be mindful of our time. We're a little bit over, but as we're coming to the end, I want to say that one of the things that we didn't get to, but I think we do need to brush upon it pretty quickly, is what are some things, name 3 or 4 things that you think are really important to be in an associate contract.
So, one is I'm never going to hire an associate that doesn't have a minimum buffer. I want them to come in, I want them to learn. I am never going to let an associate come into my practice and have to worry, am I going to make enough to feed my family? I think, it all depends what you're about, but I'm in it for the long haul. Every employee I hire, whether it's an associate or whether it's a hygienist or an assistant, every person that I want you here for the long haul. So for an associate, that means I'm going to give them a minimum buffer to where they don't have to worry, where's my next meal coming from? Which I think is a horrible situation for an associate to get into. The other thing that is not necessarily in the contract, but I say to every new hire in my practice, and this is not something you can write in a contract, but it's, I think, one of the most important points in any interview is anyone that comes into my practice. I said, really, what it all boils down to is one thing. The success that we have together all comes down to one thing. You have my back, I have yours. That's it. I promise not to back down from my end. If you treat my patients like they are your patients and like everything in your life depends on the care that you give to them, and you treat this practice as if you owned 100% of it and you take care of me, I promise I will have your back for whatever you need. And I think, you know, that is it. I just had to have a conversation like that today with one of my employees where I said, remember that conversation that we had at the interview where I said, it all comes down to this. You have my back, I have yours. That's the only way we really get ahead in this world is with good team skills and partnership. I think the other thing that's important for most dentists to be comfortable with is I mean you got to have a restrictive covenant, even though they may not be able to be completely enforced. That there does need to be some there needs to be some kind of mention of, hey, you can't just come work here. I provide all this mentorship, and then you just open a new next door. I just that's so I do think that that's an important piece is, to establish something that's really reasonable to say, listen, I want to give you all the tools to succeed and maybe end up being the person that owns this practice in the long run. But I also need some assurance that, all of that mentorship doesn't end up with you opening up a practice right next door, and we know they can't solicit the patients, but just by the way things go, the people you have relationships with will move over to you. So I just want some assurance that, for my goodwill and the time that I want to invest in you, that you're comfortable in saying, okay, I won't do that. And so there's give and take in all of it, Chad. But those are three things that are really important to me.
I totally agree. I think everything that you said is spot on. I mean, the first thing that I was going to mention was the daily minimum, and I agree with you so much there. And I mean, in Texas, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, and I want to make sure that our associates are getting at least $7.75 an hour. So I want to be just a tad above
What a
that
guy.
minimum wage, just to make it enticing. Because the last thing that I want them to do is leave and go and flip burgers. Okay,
Right.
so but no, I think a daily minimum, and I took it one step further, and this is interesting. So um, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but this is the hard ass in me.
Billy Joel
At,
had a song like that.
yeah, 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 yeah. Maybe I'm crazy. Um, this is the hard ass in me, in that I saw a post the other day, and this kind of reaffirmed what I did. I'll get to it in a second. But the post was that, hey, I'm working in this associateship job. They want me there from 8 to 5 every day. I've been there a few months. I'm not busy enough. I live 2 minutes from the practice. If they need me by 11, call me and I'll be there by 11. And, I will see the patient. I will do whatever. I can be there for an emergency or whatever. That's a bullshit mentality. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That's a
No,
bullshit
agreed.
mentality.
Yeah.
When I started working as an associate, I was basically building my own practice within a practice that unfortunately backfired on the dentist that hired me. However, I want the associate to build their own practice within my practice, even though it's our practice. I want them to have patients that want to see them. I want to have them to have patients that don't want to see me that want to see them. And I think the only way that you're going to get that is if you're there and you're interacting with every single person that comes through the door. Every single person I want you to say hi to. We're making sure that we introduce her to every single person that's there in the practice. So what I did rather than daily minimum is that I divided it up and made it an hourly minimum. So in order to get the daily minimum, you got to be there every day
Yeah.
because the only way the practice is going to grow. If I hung a shingle and I decided to open up a dental practice and I said, hey, I'm going to open up a dental practice, but you know what? You just call me. And if you want a 9 o'clock appointment, I'll be there at 9. If you want to come at 3, I'll be on the golf course until 1:30. I'm going to go home and shower and shit. If you want to be there by 2, I won't even shower. I'll just be there by 2. No, that's not the way our practices are built. Our
Yeah.
practices are built by us being there, by us being involved, by us getting to know people. It doesn't mean that we have to have our hands in our patients' mouths for 8 hours every day, but we have to be involved in every aspect of patient care for 8 hours a day. And
Yeah.
so maybe I'm a hard ass, but I changed it to an hourly
No, that's
minimum
not a hard ass. I
guarantee.
actually love that thought process, and yeah, it is. It's about being there. I mean, I've known many dentists who started practices like that. They're like, oh, I don't have anything till 12, so I'm just going to go golfing, and if the girls need me, they're just going to call me. I'm like, no, that's not how you build a practice. You are there for any person who walks by, walks in the door. You use that time. Yeah, I don't care if you're watching videos on how to use a bitine ring and a sectional matrix. You use that time to build and grow yourself. And so you're more prepared for whatever happens next. But I think that I love that, Chad. That's great.
So, number 2, uh, I agree with the restrictive covenant, but that's been a big deal in Texas right now. And so, yes, there is one in our contract. But number 2 for me is a CE allowance.
Oh,
And
100%.
when does it start? Because, you've heard me say this before, and I speak from experience. I wish that I would have listened to 50-year-old Chad when I was 20-year-old Chad and said, hey, reinvest in your education because you don't learn everything you need to know in dental school. You know, you make a damn good living coming out of dental school. Take a portion of that, sock it away, and start putting it into education. So
Yeah.
that's number 2 for me.
Single best
And
investment in dentistry is in quality CE.
yeah, exactly. And it sure as hell isn't coming from you and I.
Yeah.
So,
I disagree with that.
I'm teasing. And I don't know. I think I don't even know if I have 3, but those were my 2 kickers. Everything else was pretty standard, but my third is to make sure that you have an experienced party writing this that has the best interest of both parties in mind as they're writing it. Um, and give the associate the opportunity to look over it, make suggestions, because quite frankly, even though the person writing it is supposed to be very smart, they might miss something. It might be a standard one that they put together years ago. There may be things that both of you want that's just not in there. Let everybody take a look at it, do notes, take a couple jabs at it. Don't take the first one, and really look through that contract and make sure that you're covered from head to toe.
Yeah. So that's a great point, and I know we're way over, so I want to be brief about this comment, but I think you just hit on something really big. It is important to have someone who has written many other dental contracts and has worked in dental and is familiar with that world really be on top of your contracts. You may have a friend in law, you may have other business attorney associate friends that say they can do it. And yeah, I mean, the contract itself is not difficult, but honestly, getting into contracts is easy, getting out of them is difficult. So, the little bit of extra money and finding someone with the expertise that really knows the landscape of the dental profession, I can't I cannot say enough how important that is, when you actually develop a contract for an associate. Because if you just write it yourself and go on like a legal Zoom or something like that, the problems are not at the beginning. The problems are in the middle when the thing comes up that isn't properly addressed in the contract.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I think that was a real spirited conversation. It was
Yeah, great show.
wonderful. I
Loved it.
hope some people got something out of it. If you did, feel free to drop us a note. We are certainly here to help. I am by no means an expert. This is our first rodeo. It's actually our second rodeo, but I look back on some of the things that we did with our first rodeo, and maybe we didn't do it the right way. But that's not a knock on us or who we had. It's just a knock on inexperience. But it's worth the effort, the time, the money that you put into it, to get the right person in place and show your loyalty to that person and show your eagerness to see them succeed within your practice. So I'm proud of the way that we did it. I know that Jeff has had experience in this. Always proud of the way that he's done things. But we'll certainly provide you any links that we have. Our good friend, Dr. Paul Goodman, Dentist Job Connect. I know he's got associate contracts. David Rice is fantastic with associates, and he's got contracts as well. We'll connect you with the right people. And, if you're trying to get a contract together, whatever you're doing, just feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. That's why we're in the know. So with all that, let's have a great night. Have a great week, folks. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And I think it's just Jeff and I again next week. But you know what? It's going to be a hell of a time. So good night, everybody.
Good night.